The police department can stop murders before they can even be committed. They also know the names of the perpetrators and victims using an automated system. They use oracle-like humans who have gone through a psychological transformation to predict the future. The movie opens in the year of 2054. In Washington, D.C., a police department called Pre-Crime has completely eradicated homicides in the area. This can happen by allowing the police to stop murders before they can even be committed. The police obtain the data from precogs, three extraordinary humans who can see glimpses of the future in visions. When the precogs have the vision that a murder is going to be committed, an automated system generates two painted wooden balls. One contains the name of the victim and the other contains the name of the perpetrator. One morning, John, the head of pre-crime, comes to his office where his colleagues inform him about the upcoming case. It is a red ball case, which indicates a crime of passion committed spontaneously and can only be seen less than an hour before the murder is committed. The visuals obtained by the precogs are transferred to a futuristic screen where the police can analyze the visions to determine the exact date and time of the crime. John leads the case and meticulously shifts through the images on the screen. He learns that the murder will be committed by a man who will catch his wife having an affair. With careful deduction and attention to detail, John and his team successfully determine the location of the crime. Before they head there, an agent from the Department of Justice named Danny comes in to do an inquest on the pre-crime department to look for any potential errors or flaws in the system. Long story short, John and his team finally arrive at the neighborhood. However, they do not know exactly which house will be the crime scene. John decides to contact his colleagues at the office for a final analysis. After identifying the correct house, John rushes in and manages to apprehend the perpetrator just before the man stabs his wife with a pair of scissors. The rest of the team also barge in through the roof and secure their target. They eventually arrest the perpetrator for future murder and give him a halo, a device placed around his head that renders him fully incapacitated. Back at the facility, Danny notices the precogs having another vision of the same crime that John just stopped. A policeman explains that the precogs would sometimes have these echo visions after prevention of a crime. At night, John goes for a jog and finds his drug dealer, who hands him Narrowin, a fictional hard drug. John comes back to the house and reminisces about his son, Sean. It turns out that Sean was kidnapped and never found. He then plays another file, reminiscing about his wife, Laura, who has left him some time ago. John looks sad and depressed before taking the drugs to calm himself down. The next day, John comes to the office where he meets Lamar, the director of pre-crime. Lamar expresses his concern about the inquest from the Department of Justice. He orders John to keep watching on Danny, as he could be a potential hurdle for their progress. Meanwhile, Danny talks to several members of the pre-crime team who explain how their system works. Danny argues that pre-crime does not really arrest criminals because the crimes were never committed. John suddenly comes in and says that the precogs' visions are absolute certainty and they can never be wrong. After a lengthy argument, Danny reveals that he is the representative of the country's attorney general. As a result, the entire pre-crime operation will now be under Danny's supervision. Soon, all of them go into the precogs' chamber where the three precogs, Agatha, Arthur, and Dash, lay in a shallow pond. The liquid in the pond acts as a nutrient supply and amplifies their abilities. The precogs' caretaker explains to Danny that the precogs are kept in a dreamlike state, never to awake and never to asleep because it is the best state for their abilities. When they all leave the chamber, John stays there staring at Agatha. Agatha suddenly wakes up and grabs John, asking him if he can see. John looks at the screen to her vision of a man drowning a woman. Seeing this, the precogs' caretaker rushes into the pond and helps Agatha. Confused about what Agatha meant, John heads to the guard's room to examine all the previous files. He asks the guard to show him Agatha's previous vision of drowning victims. John eventually finds an old pre-crime vision for a female victim named Anne. Curious about it, John enters the containment room where the prisoners are kept in a sleep state. With the help of the guard, John finds the perpetrator who was in Agatha's vision. The perpetrator's identity is still unknown because he swapped his eyes to trick the identity scanner. John asks the guard to show him only Agatha's vision. However, her vision is the only one that was not stored in their database. Moreover, they also discover that Anne's current location is unknown. John quickly informs Lamar of these oddities. Hearing this, Lamar changes the subject of their conversation, alluding to John's drug addiction. Lamar worries that John's drug addiction could affect his amazing work at pre-crime, but John assures him that will not happen. On the other hand, Danny somehow breaks into John's house and finds evidence of his drug abuse. He also knows what has happened to John's family. When John returns to his office, the precogs generate a new ball containing the name of the victim, Leo. This time, it is a brown ball case, which indicates a premeditated murder and can be predicted up to 4 days before it is committed. While analyzing through the images, John is shocked to see that the future perpetrator is himself. Before his colleague takes the other ball, John quickly takes it and asks his colleague to get out of the room. Distraught, John tries to review the images one more time, but still finds no error. However, the precog's caretaker also sees the images from the precog's chamber. Fortunately, he gives John 2 minutes before he sounds the alarm because John has always been nice to him. On his way out, John meets Danny in the elevator. Danny immediately confronts him about the drugs, but John quickly holds him at gunpoint before escaping the facility. On the highway, John calls Lamar, informing him that Danny might have set him up. John thinks that the crime does not make sense because he never met Leo and the crime would happen in 36 hours. John's car suddenly gets overwritten by pre-crime, so he is forced to jump off to save himself. At the same time, the pre-crime team prepares to hunt John. Danny tells Lamar that he wants to take over the manhunt as he is performing investigation on pre-crime. At that time, the police identify people using the retina scanners installed in almost every door and entrance of public facilities. Because of that, the pre-crime team manages to find John in a subway. John quickly flees into an alley, but the pre-crime team easily surrounds him. Although they are using jetpacks, John attempts to escape. However, he eventually runs into Danny. They run to a car manufacturing plant. While John and Danny are fighting, John falls onto the assembly line and ends up getting trapped inside a car. John quickly leaves them and visits pre-crime founder, Dr. Iris, at her home. He learns that precog's creation was a complete accident. At first, Iris tried to heal them, but instead turned them into precogs. Iris says that early neuron addicts had been predisposed to having mentally disabled children. Many of them had precognitive abilities and were tested, but all died except for Agatha, Arthur, and Dash, who were submitted to pre-crime. Iris states that precogs are never wrong, but one precog occasionally sees a different future vision from the others, known as a minority report. These discrepancies are reviewed and immediately purged from the official record as pre-crime cannot have a system that would instill doubts. This indicates that all suspects might have alternate futures and might not have committed the crime. John is dumbfounded by this revelation, as it could threaten the pre-crime system. However, the precogs still retain their individual memories. Knowing this, John decides to find his minority report where he might not kill Leo. Soon, John meets an illegal surgeon and has his eyes replaced. With that, he will not be easily identified by the police. On the other side, Danny and the pre-crime team are analyzing the visions, trying to find out what John is going to do next. Danny comes up with the idea to learn more about John by visiting Laura's house. According to Laura, John started using drugs after Sean was missing to calm his anxiety. Danny suspects that John and Laura separated due to John's busy job at pre-crime. However, Laura states that she left John because she saw Sean every time she looked at John. After the surgery, John must keep his eyes covered because he needs time to recover. While he is asleep, John has a dream about Sean. John and Sean were having fun at a public pool. The two contested with each other who could hold their breath the longest underwater. When John came to the surface, Sean was gone. John tried to find Sean in the crowd, but his efforts were in vain. He wakes up screaming Sean's name and slowly makes his way towards the kitchen. In the meantime, the pre-crime team arrives and searches for John in the building. They deploy spider robots to scan the eyes of everyone in the building. John hears the announcement and tries to submerge himself in a bathtub to hide from the robots. However, the robots eventually find him and electrocute him, forcing John to open his eyes. One of the robots quickly scans his eyes. Luckily, it reads him as a different person. After further analyzing precog's visions, Danny sees a woman in the room with John and Leo when the crime is about to be committed. Meanwhile, John returns to pre-crime and makes his way to the precog's chamber. Danny finally recognizes the woman in the vision as Agatha and realizes that John will come here to get her. When Danny and the pre-crime team arrive at the precogs chamber, John manages to kidnap Agatha before escaping down the drain. The precogs caretaker describes Agatha as the most talented precogs. He also warns Danny that their system cannot work properly without Agatha. Later, John takes Agatha to a hacker who successfully retrieves Agatha's vision of Leo's murder. However, John sees the visions playing out the same way as before, ending with John shooting Leo to death. John angrily asks Agatha whether he has a minority report, but she answers no. Agatha then shows him the vision of Anne and her killer. Before Agatha can reveal the killer, the pre-crime team arrives there. Because of this situation, John and Agatha are forced to escape and make their way through a crowded mall. The two go to the hotel where John would kill Leo. They enter Leo's room, but they cannot find Leo there. John examines the room and finds numerous photos of children. He also finds a string of photographs showing Sean and Leo. At that moment, John is convinced that he has not minority report, so he intends to kill Leo. When Leo comes in, John immediately confronts him and attacks him brutally. At one point, John points his gun at Leo, but ends up choosing not to shoot Leo at the last second. Leo then admits to John that he was hired by someone to plant the photos. He wants John to kill him so that his family can benefit from his death. John is confused to hear this confession and keeps asking Leo about the person who hired him. When the two get into a scuffle, John accidentally pulls the trigger and shoots Leo in a similar manner to the precogs file. John and Agatha escape from the hotel just before the pre-crime team arrives there. After finding a lot of evidence there, Danny suspects that something is wrong at the crime scene. He then calls Lamar, telling him that chasing after John was the wrong decision. Danny shows Lamar 2 copies of Anne's murder visions, one from the containment room and the other from Agatha, which was retrieved by the hacker. He compares the 2 visions and finds a small difference between them. Danny suspects that the 2 visions are 2 separate crimes made to look similar. He thinks that the first one was thwarted by pre-crime, but the second one succeeded shortly after. For this to happen, the mastermind would have to hire someone else to kill Anne. Once pre-crime arrests the suspect, the mastermind could then come in, dressed in the same way, and commit the exact same crime. The precogs might detect it, but the technicians would probably misidentify it as an echo vision. After hearing all his explanation, Lamar shoots Danny to death undetected because the precog system is offline. Meanwhile, John and Agatha arrive at Laura's house to hide. Unbeknownst to them, Laura informs Lamar that John has arrived at her house. John and Laura are having a conversation while Agatha is roaming around the house. John finally realizes that he had been set up because he knows about Anne's murder. He then runs into Agatha, who reveals Anne is her mother. Before she can reveal Anne's killer, the pre-crime team has arrived to capture John. He is imprisoned for the alleged murder of Leo and Danny. They also take Agatha and reconnects her to the system. When Laura talks with Lamar, Lamar accidentally reveals himself to be Anne's killer by disclosing details about the crime. As Lamar attends his celebrity banquet, Laura goes to the containment room to free John. After giving his speech, Lamar is shocked after receiving a phone call from John. John reveals the truth and streams the recording of Anne's murder at the banquet. Apparently, Anne sold Agatha to pre-crime while she was addicted to heroin. After getting rid of her addiction, Anne tried to reclaim Agatha. However, Lamar refused to return her because pre-crime would not function properly without Agatha. Instead, he hired a neuron addict to kill Anne Lively, and the attempt was stopped by pre-crime. Once they departed, Lamar killed Anne in a manner identical to the first attempt. The actual murder footage was deleted by technicians as a misidentified echo vision. Now, everyone knows that Lamar was the one who killed Anne. At the same time, the precogs generate a red ball case showing that Lamar will kill John. When John and Lamar finally meet, John states the dilemma that Lamar faces now. If he kills John, Lamar validates pre-crime at the cost of his own freedom. But if he spares John, Lamar will see his program shut down. Having no other choice, Lamar chooses to kill himself right before the pre-crime team arrives. Sometime later, the pre-crime department is abandoned. All prisoners are unconditionally pardoned and released, though many remain under police surveillance. John eventually reconciles with Laura, who is now pregnant with another child. The 3 precogs are moved to an undisclosed location where they could live in peace.